Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for Health Talks with Dr. Trinh. The one show, the only show that shows you the path to a healthier life, one conversation at a time. And today, what a conversation. This is going to be one of those freewheeling, we're going to cover the world kind of conversations here. We've got the men to do it. Dr. Trinh, welcome, sir, and welcome back your guest.
Good morning. Are we a week out from, how many weeks out from Veterans Day?
Well, what is the 11th? So we're a couple weeks out here, yeah.
A couple of weeks out. Yeah, Veterans Day came and I thought about Steve during this time, every year actually. And my good friend Steve Wilburn, who like myself has untreated ADD.
I think you both have ADD because you just can't stop thinking. That's it. Your minds are so active. You're just go, go, go. Hey, welcome, Steve. You've been on the show before. Remind us your veteran past here. Let's start with that. It's an amazing story. You were in Vietnam.
Yes, I was. I lied about my age when I was 17. Oldest of 9 kids, growing up in a farm family in the Midwest. Sleeping with only 6 other Marines in a Quonset hut in boot camp seemed appealing, you know. It was
Go figure. Yeah.
And no, seriously, I come from a family of patriots, World War II. My dad served, all my uncles, all the people I looked up to and appreciated. My grandfather was a hero of the tobacco wars in Kentucky and received a lot of acclaim. Because of the role he played in those famous battles.
Now, wait a minute. I'm a history major from the University of Michigan. I don't think I've ever heard of the Tobacco Wars.
This is the Black Patch Wars.
Oh, sure. Yeah, okay.
So basically, in the early part of this century, the Duke family was trying to take over all of the independent tobacco growers, and quite a revolution took place. And anyway, my grandfather headed up a militia that conducted a famous raid and started putting an end to that nonsense. And so genetically, he was ADG too. He was killed tragically later. Anyway, I digress a little bit, but I'll do that on occasion. But the point is, all the way back, I'm a son of the American Revolution.
Wow.
I was actually checked all the way back in my lineage and verified that my forefathers fought in the American Revolution.
But take us back to those days of Vietnam. I grew up in there. I'm a few years younger than you are here, so I wasn't asked to go serve, and I always wonder what I would have done had I been drafted, because those were the days of draft dodgers. Those were the days of people saying, no, this is an unjust war and we're not going there. This is a day when it divided the country enormously, and even the vets who came back weren't greeted the same way vets came back from World War II here. Talk about that, because there were many like you, that served right up because of the continuous service of their families, were either vilified or questioned for their continuation of that service during that period. It was a very violent, very, in some ways, kind of like today, very divided society here.
Very much so. As I said, after I got out of boot camp and went through my advanced training in reconnaissance and a lot of other skill sets in the infantry type MOSs in the Marine Corps, we were deployed to Vietnam, and I used the Imperial we a lot, the Imperial we meaning me.
Yeah.
And because I don't like to just focus on me,
right?
Because all my brothers were the same, including Iggy, who is a former Marine.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too. Yeah, I mean, that's another amazing story, who comes from as a refugee from Vietnam, having seen it from the other side of the spectrum here, and isn't bitter, isn't angry at the United States, comes to the United States and feels compelled as a young man to give something back to the military. I would argue that bombed his country here. I mean, this is this is an amazing combination of two people, maybe three people, because I'm sort of a little bit of that. I wasn't really a hippie, but sort of that, I was influenced by all that in that period of time. That was when we questioned America in a way we never have before here.
Absolutely. Well, revolution, I think, is healthy. Questioning is healthy. Each generation has to define liberty and freedom,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right.
So Vietnam, quickly summarize, I served, I was severely wounded. I saw horrific things like you would see in the news today. Iggy's relatives and fellow countrymen. I saw children slaughtered, blown to bits, if you will. I'm not going to digress into graphics, but just to say that those horrific visions that you see flashing on your TV today are forever etched into my memory banks,
right.
including those bodies of my friends who I served with, horrifically disfigured and dead, at 18 and 19 years of age.
Yeah.
Fast forward, I was wounded the last time in November. Actually, 2 days ago was the anniversary in 1967. I was severely wounded. My parents found out, they falsely reported that I was KIA.
Wow.
We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have the types of communication we have today. So the Marine recruiter, on 2 other occasions when I was wounded or had malaria, walked up that driveway, knocked on the door, and told my parents, I was hurt. This time they knocked on the door and said I was KIA.
Wow.
I was medevac from the battlefield to Da Nang, which was a regional center for the Marines, to Yokosuka, Japan in 1 day.
Wow.
So immediately from the battlefield, my wounds were severe. They took me to Da Nang, stabilized me, put me on a medical flight to Yokosuka, Japan, stabilized me again for about 7 hours. Fortunately, there was a flight leaving for Elmendorf in Alaska, and went from Alaska to Scott Air Force Base, which was literally 6 miles from my home. Wow. And on my way to the Great Lakes Naval Hospital. All that happened within relatively 48 hours or so. So my parents didn't know. They weren't made aware that I was alive. So I called on the phone. My brother, younger brother, one of the 9, Gary, answers the phone. I said, "Gary, it's Steven." Click. I called. The Red Cross nurse, I'm not dialing, this is the old dial phone.
Yeah.
The Red Cross nurse calls again. This happens 3 times. Finally, I go, "Gary, this is Steven. You're Gary, Sally, Michael, David, Gary, Keith, Janet, Sandy, Robin." And then he screamed and said, "Mom." Anyway, my mom gets on the phone. I don't know this, right? I don't know that she doesn't know. So they pack up the station wagon with the 9 kids, grandma, mom, and dad, right? And a couple of neighbor kids. So they come, and they couldn't see me because of the condition I was in, but we were able to talk through the wall, the glass wall. Anyway, that's how they found out, and that's how I found out.
So one of the things that struck me, I'm a big military history buff. My dad was a bomber pilot in World War II. As I said, I never was asked to serve, and thank my lucky stars, oh boy, they didn't ask me to go to that conflict here. I was a year or 2, away when they stopped the draft. And I was in college, so I figured I could get a deferment anyway. It really was a different war in that, and one of the things, so many things were different about it. You can forget the geopolitics of it. When my dad came back from World War II, which was a horrendous life and death struggle, he had weeks to decompress, coming back on the Liberty ships and getting discharged. There was a long period between trying to adjust to battle and coming back home. Vietnam, one of the things that I think discombobulated so many young men is that 1 minute you're in the jungle fighting and the next minute you're home. I mean, like that, like overnight, immediately. And I don't think there was, I don't know if anybody ever thought about that, but there was no decompression period. There was no way to adjust from the world of life and death struggles to being back home and on the streets again here or in your family. And I think that nobody's ever written about that or talked about that, but I always thought that was the first war where people came back quickly. Was that a problem for you? Do you think, am I onto something, or is that just my imagination working here? Was that?
Yeah, you're onto something. It afflicts a whole generation, obviously. You mentioned the world, coming back to the world. I'm actually writing a book, or I've been threatening to write the rest of it. Mm-hmm. It's the world. When you come back to the world, it's a different world. The only way I could rationalize what happened to me and effectively deal with it is I was on a foreign planet. This is not reality.
Yeah.
This isn't a reality TV show, something like that. Because when you come back to the world, you don't have that adjustment period. I literally, as I told you, I was in a horrific battle, getting shot at, blown up. My buddy's getting killed, and literally within a couple of days, I'm at home with family.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. How do you reconcile those two things? Yeah. Right.
And you don't. And I had a traumatic brain injury on top of it, which a lot of my friends will attest to. The point is that you hit upon something. When we came back, we served as individuals. We won as a group.
Right.
But then when we came back, we came as an individual. Well, I was a little different because of the wound in medevac. But really, people rotated in and out of the units as individuals. Your father, in the example, my father and relatives, they served as a unit.
Right.
They stayed together the entire conflict, the entire time, and came home as a unit. Where we didn't have that camaraderie, we came back as individuals.
Wow.
I think that's another part of the story that doesn't get told, my friend.
Well, I had a good friend much later in life, a few years ago, in fact, who I learned had been a special forces, a Green Beret. You know, I know the Marines were extreme, and everybody would argue who's the most extreme, but the Green Berets are certainly right up there. And I used to sort of pester him, tell me a story. And he's like, I'm not going to talk about those days. Tell me a story that summarized your experience in Vietnam. And finally, over a drink one night, he told me, so I'll tell you one story, and that's it. And he had, his job was to go behind the lines and capture an NVA, a North Vietnamese Army officer. They were trying to get some intelligence. The only way was they would literally go kidnap one of these guys and drag him back the lines, and however they interrogated him, get some information out of him. So that was his job. Alone in the jungle trying to find an NVA officer. And he found one. And he said, I beat him up and tied him up, and now I'm carrying him over my back because the guy's, all beat up and everything here. And trying to drag him back out of the jungle. I think that alone's amazing. And he said, I got lost. And he said, I realized I don't know where I'm at, and I'm not sure which way to go. And he said, I sat down and realized the guy I was carrying was dead. So now I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm alone. I'm cold. I'm tired. My whole mission is this bust. The guy's dead. I feel like I'm dying. And he said, I pulled out a pistol. He said, honest to God. And he said, I put it to my head thinking, I guess I'll just end this. And at that moment, a helicopter flies over, sees him, picks him up. And the first thing is they're blaring Jimi Hendrix, and he gives him a cold Budweiser and flies him back. And he said, that's surreal. 1 minute you're at the most desperate point in your life. The next minute you're drinking a cold beer and listening to music. He said, that contrast, he said, was Vietnam. And I thought, that
absolutely.
And I think that led to many, we've talked many times about the Vietnam veterans. I think more than most veterans have suffered when they come back, partly because of that quick thing, partly because of questions about the war, and partly because the society didn't welcome. Were you welcome? Your family certainly welcomed back, but in the community, did they spit on you or yell at you? A lot of Vietnam veterans came back and said, we weren't honored for what we did. We were vilified.
The only real negative experience I had before I went to college was in the airport. For the first time I was going to come home, I was in the hospital 9 months recovering from my wounds, and I was well enough now to be able to get on an airplane and fly home, and I was all excited. And I went to the airport, and at that time you were mandated to fly in uniform.
Right.
So I was in a dress uniform, not the dress blues, but in the uniform of the day, Class A as we called it. So I had all my ribbons on, and I had quite a few. I'm not going to get into that, but decorations and things.
Yeah, I know you're a decorated guy.
Yeah, as I was walking through the airport and getting ready to go to the restroom, two guys, hippies as we would call them today,
right.
screamed at me, baby killer, that kind of stuff. And I just kept walking. They spit on me, only at my shoes. They did not spit on my face. They didn't do anything. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether to kill them, or grab them by the throat, rip their throat out, which was my first instinct, or I just decided to walk. And I suppressed that anger. That's part of the problem with Vietnam vets like me. We suppress.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Suppress. And you don't deal with it at the moment, and it eats at you later. That's
right.
part of my story. That's what happened to me. That's the only incident where I was really verbally and
Confronted.
Yeah.
Because today, everywhere you see a veteran, people left, right, or center will always say thank you for your service. I see that all the time in our studio and everywhere, and I express it myself here because we all admire people who are willing to go to extremes. Here's my last question for both of you, and then we'll move on to other subjects here.
Sure.
There was a day when I grew up, when we all grew up, when men of service were viewed. It was almost partly it was a rite of passage. You had to give back. You felt that need, whatever the service was, and whether it was the Peace Corps or the Army or something, you felt like you had to participate in something, and it was expected of young men to go through this. That went away with my generation. I don't know anybody younger than me, other than Dr. Trin's son, who who volunteers out of a sense of, I've got to give back. This is my time. I got to go through this. That's not a norm today. And I go one step further. The leaders of today, none of them have ever been in battle. None of them have ever served in any way, shape, or form, left or right. Obama didn't serve, Trump didn't serve. We got to go back to John McCain to be the last one of that breed who served in the war. The privileged people who run our country these days here, the people who graduate from top academia, who run the big corporations, almost none of them have any service experience. The people who serve today are generally those disadvantaged people who see it as a way out of poverty or an opportunity or whatever or something. It's a different group of people. The generation that runs the country has no, by and large, in my opinion, has no background in serving in any way, shape, or form. What do you think about that? How does that change our world?
Well, just a little bit changes a lot. But two of my three sons served. One was wounded in Afghanistan. Christopher served several tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. My other son, Steve, served for 22 years, active duty and in the reserves. So that fruit didn't fall far from the vine.
Yeah.
And that's number one, because we live in an entitled society today, as I call it. But how do you figure this entitlement? It's on the blood of patriots that we have this freedom, that you have the ability to live the way you want to live, have a talk radio show, have the business opportunities, go to medical school. That's on the blood of patriots.
Yes.
There's no question that is a fact.
Well, we live in a world, and I'm not trying to pick on President Trump. I'm not a big fan of his, but I think he spoke for many people. This, and whether it's true or not, this idea that somehow you're a chump if you sacrifice your life for others here. That if you get wounded, you're not to be honored. He likes winners, not losers. I don't say that's I think he speaks to something in our society where it starts with me. It's all about me. How's this going to help me? What's this going to do for me? I'm going to go do this for you and I'm going to put my life at risk? I don't know. That doesn't seem like a good proposition for me. We don't seem to live in a world of sacrifice, of service. Those aren't honored values. You're like, what? You're going to do that? I don't know. That seems like there's a better way, an easier way. Talk about that, Dr. Trinh. Your son didn't have to go. Steve's sons didn't have to go. What is it that makes them compelled to go? And I can't believe that many of their friends went.
Yeah, well, Jonathan is a first lieutenant now with the Marine Corps, the Light Armor Reconnaissance, Camp Pendleton, and he was actually interviewed about why he became a Marine.
College
And
graduate, could have gone to med school like you or done lots of things. Instead, says, I'm
graduate.
going to take a pause and go serve the country.
Yeah, and if I recall on his interview, he shared that he uh, was blessed to be part of a family who was rescued by the Marines on a Chinook helicopter
Yeah.
on the day before the fall of Saigon on April 29th, 1975. And from our experience as, first generation war refugees, and the blessings of being in this country and the opportunities that we had, he wanted to close the loop.
Wow.
And closing the loop in him being blessed with an opportunity to go to college and these opportunities for work and things of that sort. His way of closing the loop was to join the Marines and to serve the country and just kind of follow our footsteps with that. And so that was his reason.
So am I wrong? I mean, I don't think of, I think of my daughter and her friends and stuff. None of them would ever, joining the service was not high on their list here. Some did, but few did, it seems like. Most went on to the normal suburban lifestyle. Let's go to college, let's get a good job, let's get an internship, let's start a company. They're all entrepreneurs at heart these days here. All of that speaks to them. But I wonder, and I'm a product of it. I didn't serve. I was the first of that generation where it was sort of like, I don't know, what's good for me? It was the first thought. Maybe not what's good for the country, I'm sorry to say. How do we get back to that feeling of service, of us and not me?
The best way to honor me and people who served and gave a lot for this country is to live the life you just spoke about. Live a life of freedom. Do what you want. That's our goal. Those of us who are called, it's a calling. It's a blessing to be called there. It's not a curse. It's not because you're disadvantaged, as you said earlier. No, you're very advantaged. You're going to learn some skill set of camaraderie, of patriotism. You're going to test yourself in ways you'll never be tested in any other forum. So to me, when you do what you do and the other people do what they do and they live their lives free and they live their lives to the fullest, taking advantages of the very liberties that I and others enable them to have. That, to me, is the greatest compliment you can give a veteran.
Wow. Okay. Well said.
So I'm really excited now, Steve, now that I know you are planning to write a book.
I need your help.
Because I'm going to keep you accountable to get this book done, because everyone needs to hear your story.
Yeah.
What I want to do is actually do some more interviews with you, and then use these interviews as maybe the backdrop of your book, and maybe
there you go.
Maybe kind of cut up the interview to like short segment reels, these Facebook reels and things of that sort,
Yeah.
and learning points, right? What can we learn from Steve?
Because it's interesting you say that. I had a show years and years ago, a guy, not a veteran, but he was a very respected executive coach, head of the Coaches Federation, and he always wanted to write a book, and he was just stuck on the first chapter, the story of me, and then he could never get to the point of the book. I tell my story, you could do that, but how I got here, along the way, but what did I learn? What's the takeaway? What's the lesson from all this? And so, but he had lots of ideas and stuff, so he would talk them out, and he took his show over a year and chopped it all up and made that into the book. That he could tell the stories rather than he could physically write the stories. Writing them was painful, and he'd go down rabbit holes and all sorts of other stuff here.
With AI now, if you tell the story, I'm sure ChatGPT will put it all together into a book.
Yeah, or at least an outline, and then you kind of got the beginning, the middle, and the end. Because and here's the secret of storytelling. I'll share it with everybody here. I know this. I studied script writing for a number of years, UCLA and whatnot. I thought I was going to be a script writer. I was in Hollywood as an entertainment publicist, and so I was very immersed in the movie business. And my professor, my first professor in screenwriting, told me the formula. He said, I'm going to give you the secret right now. Here's a story. Story has three elements: beginning, middle, and an end, right? Three acts to a play. And the first is you set up the problem, or set up the joke, or set up the struggle. I got to get here to a certain time. Here's the challenge. Here's what we're trying to do. We got to get to the mountain before something blows up. I got to find the girl again. I got to do something. That's the compelling thing that drives the story. Then the second is the conflict, the struggle. I can't find her. She's lost. And when you think it can't get any worse, it gets worse and it gets worse. And then finally there's a resolution. Ta-da. You find her or you don't. But there's some change. You change. There's a struggle. There's a problem. There's a struggle. And there is an epiphany. There is a aha moment. Something happens and you've changed. You've learned something. That's the moral of the story, boys and girls. I have businesses all the time that come in here and I say, now you're going to tell me a story. Like you, we'll get into this in a minute, all the entrepreneurial things you've done. And they say, oh, I got a great story. And the story goes like this. I came up with a problem. I drew out the solution, and here it is. Ta-da, I'm a big success. I say, that's not a story. The story is the struggle, how you wandered in this, and the obstacles you overcame, and when you're ready to quit, and when you're ready to give up, and how did you overcome. The story isn't just saw a problem, here's the solution. The story is the human struggle, and most entrepreneurs do not want to tell the struggle. It's Bill Gates in the garage, or Steve Jobs in the garage, and the next minute he's a billionaire. I never hear about when Steve Jobs got kicked out of his own company and how he got his way back in. The struggle is somehow beneath most men to tell. I don't want to talk about how I struggled. I wasn't uncertain. I didn't know what I was doing. I want to show certainty, clarity. Here was the problem. Here's the solution. What do you think of that as an entrepreneur? Do entrepreneurs tell the real story very well?
I don't know. This entrepreneur tries, but I see. What Marine Corps had another saying that is apropos to what you were just speaking about. It's adapt, improvise, and overcome.
Yeah.
AIO. You adapt. You have this conflict. Things happen to you. How do you react to that?
Right.
You adapt to that. It's there. You deal with it. Then you have to improvise. You have to find that solution. There's no book for me on some of the patterns and pathways we'll talk about. I had to improvise.
Right.
And then I had to overcome objections. People didn't believe in my invention. They put it down. They tried to steal it. I had to overcome all of that.
Right.
The lack of capitalization. So AIO, from my veteran roots to today, I do the same thing. Whenever I'm confronted, I adapt, I improvise, and I overcome.
Well, there's your book. There's the arc of every good story. Because I'll go one step further on that. If I understand how you adapted and improvised, then maybe I believe, well, if he can do it, I can do it. If you just tell me the beginning and the end, you saw a problem and you came up with a solution, all I take away from that is he's smart and I'm an idiot. He saw it and I can't. And too often in this world, I'm going to get a little philosophical here again. I think we're looking for superheroes. We're looking for is there any movies always reflect society. We're fascinated with superhero movies. I can't figure out. The world's too complex. The problems are too big. The boogeymen are too bad. Along comes Superman. Along comes the Avengers. Along comes Iron Man. Save me. Save the world. And whether it's politicians or actors or something, or sports guys, everything is cocky. I got all the answers. I know what I'm doing. We like that sort of image because then we turn our problem over to them. They can save us. They can help us. They can win the game. They can do all this. We don't somehow think we can because we don't understand how you, as a regular person, I'm sure you're gifted and I'm sure you're smart and I'm sure you've got certain things that the average bear doesn't have, but I would suspect you faced a lot of the same problems, came over thing, and the difference between you and me or other people maybe is that you overcame them. And if you can teach people how you overcame, they see themselves, they begin to believe they can do it too, and they're not relying on just some miracle. Success to too many people is a miracle. It's not a process.
Yeah, it is a process. Go ahead, Edie.
about what PTSD is like.
Oh,
Most Americans only hear about the fact that PTSD veterans have it, and it's a long-term issue that affects mental health. But what is it like to feel to experience PTSD on a regular basis? Because I know that that's part of your past and maybe your present as well.
it's definitely my present and likely to be my future. But back in the day, as you're a physician, Iggy, it was called, they just said it was a concussion. I had a number of concussions. But the post-traumatic stress is not just about the traumatic brain injury, the physical, it is the stress part. And you mentioned your friend who was a Green Beret
Right.
earlier, that he put a gun to his head to end it. That was a different situation. I I don't put a gun to my head. I'm trained. I know that could miss or could not hit the critical point.
Yeah.
We put it here to
Oh,
get graphic. I've tasted gun oil
oh boy.
in my mouth, and I'm doing that to help others understand that you can get to that level of depression and stress, and you feel like there's no cure, there's no way out. God intervened is the only thing I can tell you, is that in that moment, a doorbell rang. A guy came to the wrong apartment. I was living in an apartment
Wow.
alone at that time, divorced and failed marriages, a lot of violence in my life at that time, not physical violence, but
Yeah.
a lot of rage. Anyway, that doorbell stopped me from actually ending my life. 22 people a day, they claim, veterans commit suicide in this country every day. So when you get to the point of PTSD, I can tell you that right now, when I woke up from a dream at 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't sleep for 3 to 4 hours a night. Iggy knows that. And what happens to me is that my dreams aren't like your dreams. They're not really like nightmares because I experienced it. It's like life to me. It's not a nightmare. It's like a living thing, like a movie that I'm watching,
Yeah.
that I'm in. And it's so vivid and so real. I sweat, and I mean physically sweat. I got to get up and move. I have to change the scene. I have to get that stinking thinking, as I call it, out of my head.
Right.
So PTSD is something I deal with. I do go to therapy. I do network with younger veterans and Vietnam veterans. I mentor a lot of veterans now. I can tell my story. I can look at a suicide guy that wants to commit suicide on a phone, on a Zoom call or a FaceTime, and I could tell him, I've had the taste of gun oil. You know, don't shoot yourself in the, I know it sounds like a ridiculous thing to tell someone, don't shoot yourself in the side of the head. There's better ways to do it if you're really that going to do it.
Right.
And sometimes that shocks them. Now, other doctors would say, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
But the guy looks at me and goes, what the fuck? How did you stop it? How did you get past it? I said, talking with guys like you. We talk through this shit. Your shit is not that bad.
Right.
My shit is better or worse. Excuse me for the vulgar.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the way to deal with it. Reality, PTSD is a living hell. The only way to mitigate it is to surround yourself with love and care, get out of yourself, and give back to those who need to hear what we just talked about today.
And it's the Veterans Administration. We've had lots of veterans come in and talk about this through the years. And one of the common complaints I've heard is that the Veterans Administration, as well-intentioned as they might be, you're quite often talking to a doctor who's never been there, who's never been through what you did. So how the hell do you know, Doc? You know, you've got a PhD in something. I appreciate you working for the vets now. Last week you worked for Hoag Hospital or something. But have you been there? Have you tasted gun oil? To put it, that's a great title for a book, by the way. The Taste of Gun Oil. There's a title right there that would catch people's ear. Talk about that. Is the VA ready to? Does the VA do all they can? Is there an improvement? Because so many vets seem to complain about the treatment that they get. that it maybe has some help, but it's not the help they're looking for. It's more this buddy group conversations that seem to get people through this.
Good point. No, the VA has, I feel I don't go to the VA for my physical treatment because I'm blessed and I can go other places.
Right.
But I can tell you that that's their only choice. It has improved. One of the ways it's improving is doing what we're talking about right now, engaging veterans like myself and others who have that common experience or background that can relate to this veteran who's in crisis mode. See, I don't look upon doctors who haven't been there. That's not a criteria for treatment to me. What the criteria is, what can you offer? You know, we're hungry for a cure. There's no real cure for what I have. I don't believe there is. I believe there's mitigation, a lesson of symptoms. You can't take out of my mind what happened to me.
No.
That cannot be erased. So you can mitigate it, though, the impact. So the point is this. The VA is learned from guys like me. I go down, as Viggy knows, I volunteer at the Long Beach Veterans Center. We serve turkey, we serve meals, we go down and give them hamburgers or pizza day to the group of veterans. And we just listen. As much as I'm talking, believe it or not, I can listen.
You can listen.
You know, listen. And that's what they need. They need to be heard.
Yeah. What do you dream? What's in your dream when you dream at 3 a.m.?
Yeah. Very horrific thoughts, especially when I hear about these horrific events that happen to the Israeli villages, Hamas. And I look at the scenes of the Israeli bombing and the children and the women who are brutally disfigured in horrific ways. People don't understand. They get an image flashed on a screen. They're not there. They don't see that. I'm not trying to say you should see that.
No.
Hope to God you never have to see it. But once you've seen it, like I said, I cannot erase that. So when I look at my own children and I look at my grandchildren, and now I'm blessed with great-grandchildren, it's still difficult for me. I have to force myself to be emotionally attached to love and be loving, okay, and accept love back. It's a barrier that I still have. I adapt, improvise, and overcome. I try to overcome it, but it's there, Iggy. So I see very vividly because it was in your country, I see young kids that I had given candy to going through that village one day, come back, and they're blown to bits in a day or two. Horribly, there's nothing left of them, to get graphic. Can you imagine seeing that at 18 and then coming back, having a normal life, embracing your child? You know, that was the difficult part of my life up until today. Sorry for my kids and my grandkids. I try to be as loving. They hopefully would say I'm an okay guy, but I have to force myself to love them, unfortunately.
So when you experience what you've experienced at the age of 18, it disconnected you from being able to love.
Yeah.
Is it, and that disconnect is due to what? Is it due to the fear that something bad may happen to them if you love them, or what is the?
It's guilt for me because I caused some of that. I killed some of those kids accidentally, but I was in combat. I know I did. Okay. I actually took lives by my own hand, not of kids, not of women, but of men, young men. I killed them. Okay. So there's guilt. There's survivor guilt, whatever you want to label it as. To me, it's guilt. How am I able to live normally when I did what I did to innocent people? They weren't NVA. I killed, yes, some NVA, but some of the people I killed, I would call more innocent, if you would. Call them Viet Cong, call them whatever, but they weren't hardened veterans. You know, they were just caught up in a bad situation or an innocent bystander. So that's what I think it is with me anyway, Iggy. When I look at my kids, including myself in the mirror, why am I here? Why am I able to have this loving child, wife, family, friends like you. I don't feel that I'm entitled to that because of what I did. Partly, I don't want to go too far on that because I have overcome a lot, but it's still there with me even till today.
How do societies heal from that? Years takes to get through these things here. The veterans die off and those memories are lost. I wonder in a country like Vietnam, they say not half the country's under 18 or something like that, some shocking number. So for most of them, it's just an ancient story. They don't live with the trauma of it anymore. They don't remember it. They didn't experience it. But I'm thinking of the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian conflict right now here. All these children growing up as hatred of each other. One group enters a country and kills women and children. And so in return, now they're going to bomb the country. And in result, 10,000 more women and children are killed. And all that does is create more hatred on both sides. More feeling of revenge, more feeling of you can't talk to these people, they're animals. You know, I don't know how you end that cycle. Along the way, somebody's got to stand up and say, enough, you slaughtered us, we slaughtered you. Let's stop slaughtering each other here. And
there's no easy answer, my friend. Obviously, there's been slaughter since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
You look at the American Indian, I'm part Cherokee Indian in my lineage. You look at it's the same. They were called savages.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they
only good Indian's a dead Indian. Right. Exactly.
Exactly, and all of that. And there's a whole history of that. I'm not going to digress into that. But anyway, the point is that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Yeah. Right.
Let's be honest. Okay.
Right.
So these are labels that we have. You're a terrorist. You're a freedom fighter. Okay. Got it. Why are you terrorists? Typically, it's because you don't have the weapons to fight equally your antagonist on the battlefield. So you have to deploy different tactics and employ different tactics.
Terror. You're going to kill women until you could do the unthinkable so that you'll quit. This isn't worth the price we're paying. We give up already. Yeah, exactly.
That's part of what I see. I'm not justifying it on either side. Just saying that's a fact. That's terror. The only weapon I have is to terrorize you into submission. That's it.
Yeah.
And all that does is, you know, I'm Irish at heart here. I don't have really any direct connection to the old sod anymore here. I'm the third or fourth generation, but you know, I grew up listening to the stories of the Catholics and the Protestants slaughtering each other in Northern Ireland, and they've done so for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they celebrate. They march through the streets, and the Protestants will remember when they slaughtered the Irish in 1500 or something, and the next week the Irish are celebrating when we fought you back and slaughtered you in 1600. And you know, it took mothers in Ireland to finally say, enough. Yes, what you guys did was wrong, and we paid you back, and then that was wrong, and everybody amplified this. Enough. We're going to end it right here. No more killing.
One of the things that I want to point out about Dr. Riggi is that part of the healing that I've been able to experience as a result of his ministry, Tongue Out, and also Jerry Houston's 7-Day Hero. They took me and several other veterans on a trip to Vietnam where and I didn't want to go at first.
Yeah.
And I really didn't. So I went there full of hate still. And I expected just to go through the motions. They put me into a leprosy colony and had me go to them and feed them and do some things in direct contact with this leper colony. Then we went to an orphanage. And boy, that changed my heart right there, just looking at these little babies and holding them. And then I did eye surgery, assisted in cataract surgery. And then finally, the culmination of the tour, I went to Da Nang where I'd fought, saw some of the places. And then I went up to Hanoi, and this was the coup de grace. They put me in a VA hospital scene with wounded veterans and people being treated from the Vietnam era. And I got to meet them and talk to them, and including 2 Viet Cong women. Then at night, we went and we were at a table at a dinner, and we were drinking with an NBA veteran across from me and me. We got drunk, as you can imagine. Veterans, telling
A couple of
through
good
an
military
interpreter.
guys, of course. Right. Yeah.
So what happens is we're showing each other our wounds. Finally, I take my shirt off. He's showing me his wounds. Yeah, it's guy stuff, right? But he pulls back his hair and shows me this scar in his head, like that's a superior wound to what I had. That's the way I took it. So I told the interpreter, I'll try to clean this up a little bit. I told the interpreter, tell him I hope I'm the one that effing shot him. She goes, no, I go, tell him. So she does, and he looks a little like this and strengthens up a little bit, and he says something in Vietnamese, and the interpreter smiles, looks at me and says, he say he hope he the one that shot you. And you'll see this pictures of him and I toasting each other, and I had a Purple Heart pin, and he had a Vietnamese pin, and we exchanged those, and we said to each other, it's almost like a patent line, I'll drink to you one son of a bitch to another. And we had that toast.
There you go.
So I can laugh about that.
Yeah.
See how we did that? And Iggy and his ministry and these other people that are doing that, they put me in a situation, but they didn't put me in that bar first with that guy.
No.
I couldn't have handled what I just said.
Right.
But by going to the leper colony, by going to the cataract surgery, by going to the orphanage, kids, going through my old battlefields, and then going to the VA hospital in Hanoi.
Well, it's like what Dr. Trin's son said. It's closing the loop. It's putting an end to the story here. Well, we're coming to the end of our story here. We didn't even get into all the amazing things you do. Give us a shout out just quickly for, is it Verde Watt?
Verde Watts. Verde Watts is the present iteration of the company. I've got some patents real quick. We'll talk about Li-Fi communications. That's not really my passion. My passion right now is clean drinking water from air, atmospheric. What we do, we have a technology where we use a pickup truck's engine to basically generate. I don't need a generator. I have a PTO off of the transmission, and we actually generate electricity, and that drives our water from air. We actually suck in air. We refrigerate it in a certain way, and we extract the moisture, H2O, from the atmosphere.
That sounds like magic. Water, I'm just going to go a magician. I'm going to grab something in there, air. I take air and poof, water. That's a magician's trick.
It's sort of like that because that's the way my mind works. But we're doing that in Africa. We're doing it in Puerto Rico. We're starting this, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's living water for children is a charity that I formed. Living waters for children, because water is life.
Yeah.
And so what I'm giving these people is clean water, access to clean water. They don't need power. They can do this off the grid, which is an amazing thing with solar and batteries.
Had somebody on years ago, Water Week, and the United Nations had the Year of Water and all these things here. We somehow think here in Southern California, well, we're used to drought here in Southern California, so we're a little sensitive to water too. But the quote that stuck in my head, and maybe this was overly dramatic, but more people have access to a smartphone than they have access to clean water. You can go into the poorest villages, I'm told, around the world, and there are cheap cell phones available that they're using. But there's no clean water in the village. That's mind-boggling.
That's one of my passions. We'll leave it like that. Clean energy, clean water. We're all about that. I've got a lot of success in that area.
Well, we'd love to have you come back and talk about those at the right time. But thank you for being so honest and open and sharing the struggle, not just the beginning and the end of the story. It's that struggle that we want to hear, that adaptation, that improvise, that gives us hope, that gives us inspiration, and makes us think maybe you're not a superhero. Maybe I could do it. You are a superhero, but maybe we can emulate you in certain ways that we didn't think we could. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for the opportunity, my friend.
We're going to do this again, Steve. I'll look at the dates. I want you back to continue this conversation so that you can tell your story. And we're going to make a book out of all this.
There you go. Well,
by the way, Steve, look, we're live on air right now.
That's it. We're on air.
Hey, look at that.
Well, and I don't think, it's the same thing with Dr. Trin's immigrant story. These stories get lost because they're embarrassing or they're difficult to tell or people can't relate to them. And so we want to hear the happy story, the positive story. Don't tell me any negative news. Everything's just simple and great in this fairy tale world. I don't think that does us any benefit. We tend to think of the world in fairy tale things. And then we start to stop to think that we can choose. As the great Marcus Aurelius, the poet and philosopher said, or the emperor and philosopher said, you can't change what happens to you, but you can change how you react to it. And that's what you've done. Thank you for sharing all these thoughts with us on this, our sort of delayed veteran show here on Health Talks. Take us out, Dr. Trin.
Thanks so much, Steve. We'll do part 2, part 3, part 4 until your story's completely told. And then we'll have chat. Then we'll have GTP put it all together for you.
Well, we got to get a little credit in there somehow. Maybe we guided it, and maybe we helped facilitate the conversation here. All right. Thanks so much. All right.
Thank you, guys.
There, guys. Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye.
Well, there you have it. Health Talks with Dr. Trin, each and every week right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.